Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Thanks for joining us. We'll just wait for 30 seconds or so. We've got over 600 DMOs and tourism executives from around the world joining us. So we'll just wait for 30 seconds or so while they come on board. Good afternoon, good morning, greetings, wherever you are across North America or around the world. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name's Chris Adams, Head of Research and Insights at Miles Partnership, and we're back for our 6th annual webinar with our very good friends at Phocuswright. Phocuswright, of course, are global leaders in tourism and travel research and analysis, and now for the 6th year in our December webinar, we've distilled the most impactful trends and technologies that are reshaping our industry. And this year, we're back with trends that have been created or vastly accelerated by COVID-19. And to make sense of all of this, I'm delighted to be joined by two familiar faces. Alice Yong, Research Manager at Phocuswright, will present their latest research and analysis on each of these trends, and our very own Elena Prostova will join me in presenting some practical examples and some additional research and resources on each topic that will make them actionable for your destination and tourism business. All the slides, huge range of supporting research and other resources will be shared today. So they'll both go out in an email, which will be sent to all the registrants tomorrow. Plus, you can see at that web address, we'll be posting the webinar recording, the slide deck, and a complete list of all the wide range of research and resources we're going to be covering today. So let's get started. We've got 5 trends to focus on, plus a bonus trend to also highlight. And I'm going to pass over to Alice to kick off the first trend, which is, of course, a microscopic virus that became the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Over to you, Alice.
Great. Thank you, Chris. I'm so glad to be here with you guys today to talk through some of these trends that we have selected for DMOs to really pay attention to over the course of the next year. There's certainly, a sense of fatigue talking about COVID, but it does remain our reality and likely will for some time. So, helping consumers navigate the complexities of trying to travel in this environment is certainly key. Risk of interrupted plans or new travel restrictions at any time, especially, if you're mid-trip, having to face testing requirements, vaccination requirements, quarantines. Travelers face a really great burden of sorting out all these puzzle pieces and taking on risk if they want to continue to travel during these days. Yes, travel, it's still super coveted by the consumer. So even in a tumultuous year when, it was often unattainable, travel still did top the priority list of discretionary spend categories across several markets, including the US and many in Western Europe that we examined. But travelers are a little more careful now after having some experience of what the pandemic can do to their plans. So one big thing is that flexible bookings are super crucial so that, if another wave of COVID disrupts their travel plans, they're not going to be left, scrambling, fighting for refunds, or worse, end up losing out on their money or trip altogether. So in all markets that we surveyed here, at least 7 in 10 say that flexible cancellation and booking policies are more important to them now than before the pandemic. And this reaches as high as 9 in 10 travelers in markets like Italy and Spain. Now, testing is another example of something that can, become a headache during this new travel environment. And more than half of travelers are not willing to jump through this hoop to travel at this point. having to test for travel can bring on a slew of anxieties. So, travelers are often left to figure out if they are taking the right test that meets the airline or the country's requirements. They're searching for where they can obtain tests, especially if they're, already in destination and having to test on arrival or test to get home. Maybe they're wondering if their test results are going to come back in time within that 48 or 72 or now even 24-hour window, right? Things keep changing as the uncertainty continues, and not to mention any added costs. And so, trip cancellation and testing, these are just two examples of pandemic headaches that are, new hurdles for travelers. But the point is, while travelers are certainly vying to be back out there, if the risks of potential problems along the journey is too high, they're going to opt to stay home or at least close to home. So, destinations and travel companies can certainly help ease some of this burden, whether it's ensuring that requirements and policies are clearly communicated and easily found, or making meet such requirements a little bit more easy, whether it's helping them obtain, the correct testing locations and testing types while they're in destination, or even providing, support should any unforeseen disruptions occur mid-journey. Recently, I just saw, an article about a hotel brand that's providing some of this kind of support so that it helps at least ease the worry and concerns and encourage the traveler that they should feel safe and comfortable to book travel.
So let's have a look at some destination-specific examples and some additional research points around the topic of COVID complexities. So at Miles, we've been researching impacts of COVID-19 during the pandemic crisis, and we worked closely with our partner, Longwoods International. And what we see is that clear health and safety protocols are still the top factor in deciding which destinations to visit in the next 6 months. And it's not just about having protocols, but also showing information in a very clear and concise way. Tourism Spain does a great job of that, making safety information approachable by enabling a future traveler select their country of origin and learn about requirements, as well as selecting a destination region in Spain and find out about potential specific restrictions, maybe some face mask use, and so on. So this information is presented in a very easy to explore way. Another example is Iceland, that does a fantastic job taking complex information and distilling it down. So people don't have to read lengthy info that is usually written for locals and not for visitors. And the experience is interactive and highly informative in more of a Q&A style way of content exploration. And this COVID hub is not the only safety information resource that Iceland makes available for travelers. There's also a safe travel app that provides critical information about road conditions, volcanic activity, weather, as well as top tips to be prepared ahead of time for a successful Icelandic vacation. So back to you, Alice, for our second trend.
All right, so our next trend is the incredible rise of vacation rentals in the time of the pandemic. So, as travelers sought travel options that allow them to stay distanced from peers and avoid crowded spaces, hotel usage declined and vacation rentals gained from that. So we saw that hotel incidence went down by 11 percentage points in 2020 within the US market as fewer travelers chose hotels or hotels were closed. The need for social distancing, avoiding crowds, and desiring more space or outdoor access was perfectly placed for the short-term rental product, which then saw a 6 percentage point increase from 2019 to 2020. On top of that, the pandemic also brought a wave of new users into the rental pool. So in 2020, 43% of US rental guests said that their most recent stay in a rental was actually their first time ever using that particular type of lodging. And that's up 8 percentage points from pre-pandemic times. So not only did it become more popular, it became more popular among new users altogether. But even short-term rental guests still do show high willingness to stay in hotels as well. So they are weighing both lodging options. Nearly 2 in 3 rental guests also considered hotel options during their last trip where they stayed in a short-term rental. Now, the 2 lodging types do serve different purposes and are seen to have unique strengths when compared against one another. So here we see, on the rental side, this type of lodging really leads in providing privacy and comfort, more bang for your buck, and a more unique experience when it's compared against hotels. Whereas on the hotel side, they are seen to be stronger in professionalism, in providing service and offering services in general, especially when it comes to accessing food and beverage options. And they also are seen to lead in the realm of safety. So, even though we did see the rentals become more popular during the pandemic, hotels are regaining share and will continue to regain share as recovery continues. Our research has really long shown that there are just consumers that prefer hotels as their lodging of choice. They like the services that come with it. They like that hand holding. In 2020 and 2021, hotels did account for a smaller share of the lodging market compared to pre-pandemic. And here specifically, we're looking at the US. But that share the share for hotels is expected to regain starting in 2022. So, even though rentals have definitely been a bright spot in the pandemic era travel, hotels are still greatly important. And so really consumers become the winner here, right? They have clear opinions on when one product is more suitable than the other, where one leads over the other. So between the two, they have greater access to choice than ever.
So Alice highlighted that COVID-19 has really taken trends around short-term rentals and supercharged them, both in terms of awareness and usage by visitors. And Kissimmee, which markets itself as the vacation rental capital of the world, highlights a range of these trends, which are also being seen in many other destinations. So let's play a video of how Kissimmee welcomes its vacation home guests to get an understanding of some of the rental properties that are available today. So as hotels closed during the early days of the pandemic, vacation rentals started their surge, and it was sought out as a place to safely cocoon and reconnect with family and friends. And in Kissimmee, vacation rentals occupancy and average daily rates have been setting records, as we've seen in many destinations. And there's particular strength in large and luxury end of the markets, the 5+ bedroom villas, including an increasing number of top-end mansions that can really only be described as private accommodation and entertainment complexes. But of course, short-term rentals create both opportunities and an increasing range of challenges. Chief amongst them, housing access and affordability, both for residents and workforce. So in destinations all over the world, this is becoming a major issue, and short-term rentals and tourism is becoming a far bigger part of the discussion in the role and relevance of tourism, including diverting funds from tourism taxation, bed taxes, to help fund affordable housing solutions. And so Miles, with our very good partners at Civitas Tourism Economics and Destination Analysts, all took a close look at short-term rentals as part of our major study on tourism taxation and DMO funding called Funding Futures. And in that study, we identified 4 critical best practices for managing STRs in your destination, from smart policies which balance the benefits and costs of STRs, through to permitting, fair and equitable tax treatments, and of course, marketing the destination, as well as short-term rentals and commercial accommodation side by side. So you can access the full Funding Futures report, which looks at actually 10 overall new or enhanced funding options for DMOs, along with global examples and practical recommendations. We've just updated the report and launched it in November 2021, and you can go through its key findings at that web address right there, or watch the webinar that we ran. And now back to Alice for a related trend, digital nomads.
Yep. So a new category of employees who can work from anywhere, right, has emerged in the COVID era, and it's really revolutionizing what it means to be a digital nomad. Pre-pandemic, digital nomads were thought to be young, fresh out of college, staying in hostels, constrained by tight budgets, must be free of roots and responsibilities to be able to live this type of lifestyle, probably looking to postpone a mundane life of 9 to 5 in the cubicle. But in the environment that we're in now, with the heightened remote working, the makeup of this traveler subset of nomads really defies those previous stereotypes. So here, we have a snapshot of who the new nomads are, right? The nomads of today. So nomadism isn't just for the young. Nearly 3 in 5 nomads are 35 years or older. They aren't just freelancers or self-employed, right? Where they're thought to have more flexibility to work from anywhere, right? But now nearly 80% have a full-time job from an employer. Also, they aren't just the fresh college grads anymore. Actually, 2 in 5 have higher education degrees, masterates or doctorates. And these new nomads are also in higher income brackets and likewise more senior in their careers. So now more than half of nomads earn an annual income of $100,000 or more, and almost 75% are middle management or higher. And then the other thing is, they do have roots and responsibilities in their personal lives as well. So the majority have, a significant other or children as well. Now, for those nomads that say that they identify with that lifestyle of, blending remote working and personal travel, and, what's very commonly known as a digital nomad to the population at large, they aren't skimping on their spending during their travels. So, nearly 3 in 5 say that they're actually willing to spend more on living expenses while traveling as a nomad compared to when they are back home. And that willingness to spend more increases as the salaries and work seniority rises as well. And then, there is a subcategory of nomads that we call blended travelers. And this was fueled by pandemic era remote working as well. So these are those travelers who started to take a lot more frequent leisure trips while working remotely from the trip destination, but didn't necessarily say that they identify with that lifestyle of what's popularly known as a digital nomad. But these blended travelers, they certainly take a lot more trips than your average leisure traveler. Even if we just consider the trips where they are both working and vacationing, these blended travelers already are taking a lot more personal trips than the general US leisure traveler. So that gap likely widens even further once any purely leisure trips with no remote work are taken into account. So we've seen in our research that nearly 65% of the general US leisure travel population takes just 1 or 2 trips a year. And that's compared to 40% of blended travelers who are just taking 1 or 2 of those personal trips where they also remotely work. On average, the blended travelers took 4.5 trips where they combined remote working with their personal leisure travel in 2020. Now, when it comes to choosing the destinations that they're going to have these nomad trips from, the new nomads really prioritize safety and access to the standard comforts that they are accustomed to from their life back home. But practicalities such as affordability, transportation, language compatibility, and healthcare access, these are also very important considerations. So they're all things that will make their trip smoother and allow them to replicate their life, back home comfortably while on the road. And then another thing that we see is that, direct destination incentives also have potential for great impact in the destination choice. nearly 9 in 10 nomads say that, you know, a destination that offers incentives such as easy visa processes or flight or lodging, these are more appealing as a location for remote working than destinations that do not. So these travelers can be bought a little bit. And so, you know, the takeaway here is that, you know, the pandemic has really widened the pool of nomads, and they are high value travelers that earn, spend, and travel more than the typical leisure traveler. As remote work authorizations continue, they will likewise continue to blend their personal travel with remote working, but seeking out destinations and travel products such as accommodations that will allow them to comfortably replicate an environment that allows them to both work effectively and live while away from home. So I did see a question just pop in here about the size of the nomad pool. Off the top of my head, I don't have the number, but it is within this greater study that we'll be publishing in January. And at the end of this presentation, we have sources for all the information. So that's a point I can follow up with offline.
So new nomads is such an exciting and actively evolving global trend for the professional world. And in the research that we have conducted with Longwoods International just a few weeks ago, we see that over 1 in 3 American travelers have some type of plan to work remotely in the coming year for up to 4 weeks, right? So this is that blended traveler that Alice was just talking about. And there are some really interesting examples of campaigns developed by destination marketing organizations to appeal to this new flexible workforce. To name a few, our client Discover Puerto Rico has launched earlier this year a workcation contest, which was offering remote workers a desk makeover with a chance to win 1 of 6 2-week trips to the island, working from a variety of really unique and exciting locations, such as floating villas or historic apartments. Another example comes from Hawaii, and this is an example of a destination that is connecting with remote workers to drive broader engagement. And with their Movers and Shakers program, they bring together purpose-driven remote workers, and especially returning expats, to actively contribute to the local Hawaiian communities, not just by their spending, but also through volunteerism, connecting with the local businesses and investment opportunities. This new nomads trend is being accelerated by major online platforms such as Airbnb and Vrbo, which have doubled down on amenities, services, and also marketing to promote long-term stays. I think we all have seen campaigns from both brands promoting the products that specifically cater to this audience. And finally, one of the latest trends we see developing is the rise of digital nomad visas, which is likely to drive the global battle for talent in the future. And currently there's a list of about 36 countries that offer special status for the digital nomads, including Costa Rica, Romania, Bali, Barbados, Iceland, and one of the most recent additions that was announced about a month ago, and there was lots of excitement about that, is Greece, now adding the digital nomad visa. So all these countries are great examples of government policies and tourism marketing working hand in hand to benefit the local economies. So off to the next trend, trend number 4.
So the subscription model is not a new thing within the travel industry. There, in the past have been several startups that have tried to take a shot at it without witnessing super great success. But certainly over the course of the pandemic, it has been revived and picked up momentum. Subscriptions in other industries like streaming and shopping have definitely seen really great success, right? But these products are often used on a nearly daily basis, if not actually daily. So it's very easy for consumers to easily justify the value of their membership price. So some argue that travel is too infrequent of a product for a subscription to make sense, right? As we just saw, the majority of general leisure travelers take just 1 or 2 trips a year. But, there are several travel companies who are still betting on paid subscriptions to succeed within the industry, right? Looking at it as a way to procure repeat customers, direct customers, and build loyalty. The extra membership revenue, of course, is always nice as well. But, some are keeping a broad focus on travel in general. So such as TripAdvisor, eDreams, Travel and Leisure, while there are other programs that are targeting more specialty markets, whether it's Inspirato that is focused on the luxury traveler, or Citizen M here, who's developing a product to target those nomads that we just talked about. And, as we look at markets in the US and Europe where these programs have launched, roughly 1 in 3 leisure travelers say that they are likely to join, a paid travel subscription that offers discounts and perks. But there is even greater likeliness to do so among younger travelers who are already accustomed to the idea of paid subscriptions in their daily life in so many different aspects. Furthermore, there's, about another quarter or so who are undecided about how they feel, and thus remains room for them to be swayed. So, our takeaway here is, the industry remains divided on the potential of paid travel subscriptions, but there is certainly traveler interest and even higher interest among the future generations of travelers. So don't count these out yet.
So subscription marketing is about creating a one-to-one relationship and the valuable first-party data that can come with those connections. And DMO's owned channels are of increasing importance and value in this context. So visitor guides is an example, along with email and other digital media that can be subscribed to, all provide compelling opportunities to build your own first-party data and create that long-term one-to-one relationship and high-value subscription market. And research undertaken by our very good friends at Destination Analysts just in the last couple of weeks highlights the value of visitor guide readers. As you can see here, they're far more affluent, more excited about travel, more optimistic about their travel plans, and they're also heavier users of all types of travel planning resources, both print and traditional media, but also very heavy users of all sorts of digital media as well. That's an extension of an 18-month study the Destination Analysts undertook in conjunction with Miles Partnership and DMA West, which was just wrapped up. It looked at the visitor guides of 12 convention and visitor bureaus across the West, and this highlighted across all of those 12 visitor guides that they still have strong reach, appeal, and impact both to current and potential visitors. And just one data point from a huge amount of research insights, you can see here that visitor guides do make a meaningful impact in terms of shaping and influence critical decisions from where to shop, what to do, where to eat, where to stay, etc. And the resources from that study are going to be available in one of the links we'll be sharing out with you after today's webinar. So let's go to our 5th trend and look at the subject of technology.
So our next trend relates to the acceleration of tech adoption during the pandemic across, industries. Companies really sought to quickly implement technologies that would increase safety of travel during a pandemic. Contactless tech was definitely one of the big ones that companies turned to, implementing them as a way to minimize personal interactions, minimize crowding. And here from a traveler's perspective, this has been an important feature to them. 60% to nearly 75% of travelers say that they seek out contactless options more now during their travels than they did pre-pandemic. And so, we're seeing tech progress at all stages of the trip. Biometrics are a reality at more and more airports now, from security check to boarding to global entry. Hotels, they are exploring contactless check-in kiosks on property, as well as pre-arrival check-in through apps with digital key cards more. Even attractions, right, are turning to technology to help minimize crowding on site at the ticket office. Several now require advanced reservations that are booked online, often with specific time slots now. So lots of evolution of how tech is making this a little bit more streamlined. But, you know, technology and privacy concerns, they often do come hand in hand these days. And that's also true here, especially with the more sensitive data, such as with biometrics. Approximately 40% in most markets here do say they trust travel companies with this type of data, except Germany, which is particularly suspecting. But that still leaves the majority of travelers in the US and Western Europe not trusting the travel industry with their biometric data. So certainly pacifying, you know, fears during this time of transition will be part of the journey. Now, mobile also got a big boost during the pandemic. And, you know, comfort with engaging with travel on mobile had already become the norm in many markets. And in the case of Asia, for example, the default. Super apps, for example, have been super commonplace for years in Asia. And these apps, you know, provide multiple services all in one place. So that means booking travel right alongside being able to hail a shared ride or paying your utility bills or shopping, ordering food delivery, and so much more. And during the time of the pandemic, certainly super apps have continued to gain momentum in Asia. Most recently, we see, you know, Paytm and Grab both going public this year. But while, you know, general super apps haven't taken off in the West, travel companies are increasingly betting on mobile apps in general. So, you know, we've heard Expedia vocalize that they are moving towards a app-first approach. Hopper, which has always been mobile first and mobile mostly, also has big plans to build a travel super app. And now they also have a big pile of money to support that, which helps. So certainly mobile continues to become the default way as we move forward. So our takeaway here is that, you know, the pandemic really forced travel companies of all types to have to expedite their tech advancement, and customers have very much welcomed it. There, you know, has been utilization in several different aspects, whether it's for customer service or booking or checking in, but, you know, certainly contactless tech and mobile have been some of the top beneficiaries in this realm. And they all go towards making that dream of a more seamless travel experience a much more feasible reality.
So technology has always been a key part of travel and tourism industry, but we see that innovation has truly accelerated greatly in the past 18 months. And we are witnessing a more visible introduction of robotics to enhance customer experience. On the slide, you can see an example from one of our hospitality clients here in Florida, Hawks K, featuring a hole cleaning robot, as well as robots serving food at Angler and Ale restaurant. And there are many other roles robots could potentially play at a hotel, so we're likely to see, maybe in some locations now, but definitely in the near future, robots handling luggage or doing some food preparation and beyond. So as Alice has highlighted, contactless technology is dramatically transforming the travel industry with various examples of experimentation and adoption. One of the most recent examples comes from Hyatt, which rolled out room keys utilizing Apple Wallet at 6 participating hotels. And guests will only need to hold their iPhone or Apple Watch to a door NFC-enabled lock in order to enter. And there's also a way to activate express mode. And when it's enabled, you won't even need to unlock your device to use it as a room key. So there's definitely lots of changes and very dramatic improvements in that space. So finally, unique, local, and authentic virtual experiences are becoming a part of the tourism landscape, as introduced by Amazon Explore last year, as well as Airbnb's virtual classes and experience. And we expect to see continued evolution in this field, involving virtual shopping, as well as virtual site visits for meeting planners. it was very interesting to see that this year virtual experiences made it to many recommended seasonal gift lists. So the level of adoption and associated value is certainly on the rise and definitely a space to watch. So now let's transition to our bonus trend, solving sustainability.
Yes, so certainly sustainability is something that we've talked about in the industry for years, and sometimes it gets brushed aside for, other priorities. But, during the pandemic, it got more and more attention as the industry had a moment of pause to really consider, the long-term impact of our business. But the road ahead is long. And from the consumer side, there is awareness and there's certainly interest in a path towards more sustainable travel. However, if it comes at a premium cost, that road will be quite bumpy still. Roughly 2 in 3 travelers across Western European markets here said that they would not pay more for travel brands that prioritize sustainable initiatives. However, there is greater commitment among the young travelers again here who are more willing to spend to be able to make more sustainable choices when they take their trips. On the air side, travelers are much more willing to just cut back on flying as a sustainable measure than they are willing to pay to offset their carbon footprint. The likeliness to pay for carbon offsetting did not surpass 35% in any of these markets, but the likelihood to reduce flying as a sustainable measure neared 50% in several markets. And then on the hotel side, the attitude trended similarly in that travelers are more likely to seek out more sustainable hotel options, but less likely to pay for it. However, the gap in willingness to travel more sustainably and pay to do so is more narrow here on the hotel side than it is with air. So, sustainability, it's certainly an issue that got a lot more spotlight during the pandemic. It requires all to do their part if we want to truly move towards a state of travel that is more responsible in terms of impacts to not just environment, but also to cultures and local communities. It's definitely going to require efforts from all that are involved, and that's travel companies, travelers, and governments alike.
So a big topic, and a topic that's going to persist through the next decade and well beyond, in terms of making sure that our industry is sustainable. And arguably no challenge is more critical to confronting than climate change. And so with this in mind, and because tourism is really at the front lines of both the impacts of climate change, but also frankly stands more to gain than pretty much any other industry in terms of grappling with the other benefits, such as looking after the natural environment that tackling climate change brings, we pulled together with a variety of our partners 26 practical ideas. It was came out of the big climate change conference in Glasgow, and we've identified 26 practical steps for DMOs and their industry partners to take to tackle climate change. And they range from how DMOs can get actively involved in the rollout and planning of electric vehicle charging stations and rental vehicle fleets, which is going to be a massive migration in our ground transportation over the next decade, with a lot of this paid for by government recovery and infrastructure funding, which is available at unprecedented levels right now. We also highlight how DMOs around the world are getting more actively involved, working with tourism businesses and their public sector partners on improving sustainability practices, everything from renewable energy migration plans through to composting and working with the restaurant sector on food waste. And we also cover off a whole range of renewable energy and energy efficiency efforts that DMOs and the tourism industry can get actively involved in, such as the amazing global movement around cool roofs. And this is an example from New York, where cool roofs can make a dramatic difference in the energy costs of major venues such as convention centres. So all these and a host of other sort of practical steps that the tourism industry can take are outlined in 26 for COP26. It's a two-part white paper series. The second part's going to be published tomorrow, will be sent out in a link in the email. Plus, you can visit that web address for a whole range of other sustainability resources that we've pulled together. So those are our 6 trends on the 6th anniversary of this webinar series with Phocuswright. Thanks so much, Alice. And I think you want to highlight just some of the resources that Phocuswright has pulled together for DMOs and tourism businesses who are attending today.
Yeah, so in the deck that you'll receive at the end, you'll just see a list of resources, some of the studies, as well as some of our conference sessions that relate to the topics that were part of this, this presentation. And then also some information about if you're interested in subscribing to our research database to be able to access the full range of resources that we have available. Yeah.
Thanks so much. And just a reminder that, again, an email with all the slides, the webinar recording and other resources will be sent out tomorrow. Plus, we'll be publishing them on our Phocuswright portal. You can actually see all the past editions of this annual webinar we've run with Phocuswright, along with a list of those resources at that web address right there. So just in our final minutes, and we did want to wrap up early today, please post any additional questions, but I thought we'd kick it off by just asking the questions that were going back and forth in the chat, Alice, in terms of the size of the digital nomad market. So,
yep.
you know.
So in our study, we found that we project that 17% of the US general leisure traveler population traveled as a nomad in 2020 or 2021. If we look at just the population of travelers that are fully employed by an employer, that goes up to 26%. If we look at just the population of travelers that are freelancers or self-employed, that goes up to 29%. So that kind of gives you an idea, right, based on different levels of employment. I saw another question here related to the nomad section about the type of lodging. So short-term rentals are definitely the #1 choice. 49% of nomads stayed in a short-term rental during their last nomad trip, but hotels were not that far behind. So 43% stayed in a hotel. And then following that, they're also staying with friends and family and in vacation homes of their own or of somebody that they know. So an interesting trend that we saw there with the lodging is that they don't always just choose one. There are, there's a good chunk of nomads that kind of blend paid and unpaid lodging to make this lifestyle more feasible or to make the budget make sense or what it is. But it was clear that the short-term rentals are leading within this space of travelers.
Yeah, and I also put in the chat that the research that we undertook with Longwood's really are very complementary and similar to the numbers that Alice shared. So we were talking about 35% all US travelers, not the general population. So US travelers, slightly smaller number. 35% have plans to travel and work remotely at least 1 to 4 weeks in the coming 12 months. And interestingly enough, almost 1 in 10 or so, 1 in 11, 7 or 8% are planning international remote working experiences as part of that. So Alice, in terms of subscription marketing, we looked at some examples there. How are you? There's been some press around some not so successful launches of subscription marketing. What do you see as some of the key factors if you're going to launch this sort of long-term one-to-one relationship with people is critical to successfully building a subscription model?
It's really about being able to communicate upfront that the value is there, right? Convincing the consumer to part with their money in advance before actually buying the travel. So that's something that I think is interesting to see how the different companies will be able to do. As we had mentioned during the presentation, right? Like something like a Netflix or a Spotify that you use daily, or, Amazon, where you can quickly calculate that you're going to break even and also save a lot more. that's very easy to sell. Whereas travel, if you're just doing it once or twice a year, right? Okay, how big is my savings? And then if it is, you know, not super significant where it completely like makes the membership price sensible right off the bat, is it also worth the restriction of me having to only book through this program so that I, you know, make back that benefit? So it's a bit of, you know, creating a really attractive use package, or, you know, what's what I'm looking for? Just being able to communicate that value really, right? So that's something that we're watching for.
Very good. We just got a question in. We discussed digital adoption and check-in, etc. What about digital implications for food and beverage, e.g. the rise of mobile dining, and of course all these takeout services, but thinking about those mobile dining options on property. Either Elena or Alice, do you have anything to share there?
We haven't done too much research that dives into that. A little bit asking about, you know, during last stay, what kind of food and beverage options are being used. And certainly we're seeing some things like delivery options being used while on property. And so it is a trend that, you know, is important to keep an eye on, especially for hoteliers to think about as they compete with the on-property food and beverage options. I think also during the time of the pandemic, it's a good to have as well, right? To think about how that can supplement your food and beverage offering. You know, recently we were at a conference where a lot of the F&B on property wasn't open yet, right? So we're all scrambling to figure out like how to feed ourselves, especially during conference time when you really just like stay in the conference center, right? And we were all relying on Uber Eats or some of these other delivery services and things like that. So certainly different use cases, but something to keep an eye on in terms of how it can help during this interesting time period that we're all navigating, but also in the long run, if it does become competitive to the on-property food and beverage options.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And we see in lots of examples with our clients where it exists as an option, right, to extend the range, and especially with some of the guests that might be staying longer, right, like to that question about nomads, like it's definitely being utilized quite a bit, but we'll have to live and see if it stays as a long-term trend.
Very good. And I just want to remind people, when we talk about subscription marketing, just emphasizing again that the assets that DMOs have, visitor guides, emails, other digital media that could be subscribed to, even though you're not selling a subscription, they provide a really valuable way to create that one-to-one relationship and the incredibly valuable first-party data that comes with that. That's of increasing importance in this sort of world where privacy and regulation is limiting the ability to target people in very precise ways through second and third-party data. So have a look at your visitor guide and other assets and really rethink of them as a centerpiece to your first-party data strategy. Which can become incredibly valuable for the wider industry as well. And just before we wrap up, I just did want to highlight a major research study that we're undertaking globally with our good friends across in Europe, Group Now, GDSM, the Travel Foundation. We're launching the Democracy Project. And as you can see on this next slide, this is a global study where we're looking at resident engagement and tourism business engagement. There's going to be multiple editions of this study, but there'll be an opportunity for destinations to collaborate and cross-pollinate ideas between the European study, where 20 major cities and destinations are already committed, from Amsterdam to Zurich and Barcelona to Tel Aviv, plus Greenland and Lapland. So we'll be launching a North American edition and a South Pacific edition, and there'll be a whole variety of ways in which we'll be distilling global best practices on how to engage effectively with your local residents to help manage some of the pressures we talked about today, whether it's short-term rentals or the influx of digital remote workers, etc. So additional information and to express your interest is available right there. So without further ado, let's wrap up today. It's been another long, complex and challenging year. And our thoughts are with everyone who's joined the webinar today. We hope you stay safe and well and have a wonderful festive season with your family and friends. Hopefully you get a break and come back refreshed in 2022. This is our last webinar for the year. I want to give special thanks to Alice and the whole team at Phocuswright for joining today with their thoughts and insights, and to my colleague and good friend, Elena. Thank you to all of you, and thank you, Alice and Elena, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.